When I sold my house and moved in with my son, I believed I was entering a new chapter of peace. He said, "You'll have your own space upstairs." But that space turned out to be a dusty storage room, while his wife turned the upstairs into her private gym. I cooked, I cleaned, I stayed quiet. Until one day, they left a document on the counter by mistake. And when I read what it said, I knew I wasn't just a guest. I was a placeholder. So I smiled, packed a folder, and made one phone call that would shake their entire world. My name is Margaret, and I'm 66 years old. For over 4 decades, I lived in the same 2-story brick house in upstate New York, the house where I raised my son, nursed my husband through his final illness, and planted hydrangeas every spring without fail. After Harold died 3 years ago, silence crept into every corner of that house. At first, I resisted the loneliness, filling my days with crossword puzzles and over-watering plants. But no matter how many cookies I baked or church luncheons I attended, the rooms just echoed back my memories. And slowly, it began to feel like I was lingering in a past no one else lived in anymore. The decision to sell the house wasn't easy. I remember standing in the empty hallway with the realtor, my fingers brushing the wallpaper my husband and I had picked out in 1982. I'd trace those same flowers every night while waiting for Jason to sneak back from college parties. "It's just a house," I whispered. "You can let it go." So I did. I sold the only home I had ever known, packed my belongings into boxes labeled Keep, Donate, and Memories, and I said goodbye. That's when Jason called. He said, "Mom, why don't you come live with us? You know Emily and I have plenty of room, and it'd be great for the kids to spend more time with you. It'll be fun. You can help with homework, maybe teach Ella how to bake those cookies she loves. We want you here." His voice was warm, and for a second, I felt like I mattered again. Like someone wanted me not just out of obligation, but truly wanted me. My heart swelled. I imagined breakfasts with my grandchildren, laughter echoing through the halls, and maybe, finally, sleeping through the night without that cold spot on the other side of the bed. It sounded like a blessing. So I said, yes. I moved in with Jason and Emily on a Saturday morning. The moving truck arrived just after sunrise, and by noon I stood in their pristine suburban kitchen, holding a mug that read, "Best Nana Ever." Emily greeted me with a polite hug. She had on yoga pants and an Apple Watch and smiled like she had somewhere better to be. "We're so happy to have you," she said without making eye contact. Jason showed me around the house, pointing to family portraits and saying things like, "You'll love it here, Mom. Ella can't wait to do puzzles with you." Look, when I asked about the upstairs guest room, he scratched his neck and said, "It needs a little fixing. But for now, we've cleared out the storage room downstairs for you. It's cozy." Cozy. That was the word he used for a room with concrete walls, no windows, and a single flickering lamp in the corner. But I smiled. I told myself, it's temporary. I unpacked my boxes, arranged photos of Harold and the kids on a small shelf, and lit a lavender candle to mask the smell of cardboard and dust. I didn't complain. I never do. I cooked dinner that night. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. Emily didn't eat. "Gluten-free month," she said, scrolling through her phone. Jason nodded politely. The kids took their plates upstairs. I washed the dishes alone. Still, I told myself this was just the adjustment period. Over the next few weeks, I did what I've always done. I tried to be useful. I folded laundry, I vacuumed the stairs. I made breakfast every morning and packed Ella's lunch with sticky notes that said, "You're smart, you're kind, I love you." Emily started leaving me lists on the fridge. Pick up dry cleaning, don't use the upstairs shower, quiet time 2-4 p.m. I followed them. I didn't want to make waves. I thought if I gave enough, I'd belong. I thought if I loved hard enough, someone would love me back. I thought this would be a second chance at family. But as the days passed, I noticed something. I was always alone. At dinner, they'd already eaten. At night, I heard laughter upstairs that stopped when I walked into the room. I wasn't part of this house. I was an accessory to it. Something convenient, something silent. I started to feel like a guest in the life I had helped build. But still, I stayed. Because when you're a mother, you hold on. Even when the room is cold, even when the door doesn't lock, even when no one says thank you, you hold on. The first week felt like a trial run for something warmer. Jason stopped by the storage room a few times, adjusting a lamp, bringing down an old rug, even promising, "We're getting that guest room upstairs fixed up next month, Mom. Just hang tight." I nodded, grateful. It was easier to believe it was temporary when your son sounded sincere. Emily kept things polite. She'd pass me in the hallway with a closed-lip smile, say, "Morning, Margaret," then slip into her office and shut the door. If she was ever in the kitchen when I was cooking, she'd slide her AirPods in and scroll through her phone while sipping green smoothies. Once I asked if she wanted help with the kids' school drop-off. She replied, "We've got a rhythm," and left it at that. Still, I held on to small moments, like the one when Ella, my 9-year-old granddaughter, tiptoed into the storage room one night in her pajamas. She asked if I'd read her a bedtime story. I pulled her close, blanket around our shoulders, and read from the same copy of Charlotte's Web I used with Jason. She fell asleep on my arm. That night, for the first time in a long while, I slept with a smile. The next morning, Emily said nothing. But that afternoon, I overheard her telling Ella, "No more bedtime visits. Grandma needs rest." The tone wasn't harsh, but it was final. After that, Ella stopped coming down. I noticed other little changes. The upstairs bathroom, where I once thought I'd eventually move in, had a padlock installed. Jason said it was to keep the kids out of Emily's workout equipment. When I suggested we all eat dinner together, Emily responded with, "We're doing intermittent fasting this month." Somehow, their meals always seemed to be at different times than mine. Still, I cooked. I made soups when I heard sniffles, banana bread when the bananas browned, and chicken pot pie when the weather turned. No one ever asked, but I hoped quietly that the gesture meant something. Jason, bless him, tried. He'd text me links to crossword puzzles or videos of golden retrievers, things he knew I liked. But he was always working, always driving someone somewhere, always in the middle of something. Our conversations shortened. Sometimes I caught him glancing toward Emily before answering me, like waiting for permission. I tried not to take it personally. I tried not to notice how Emily flinched when I rearranged the spice rack, or how she re-wiped the counters after I'd cleaned them. Once I heard her whisper to Jason, "I know she means well, but I need boundaries." I'd never felt like a burden before, not in my own house, not even when Harold got sick and the world got smaller. But here, every step I took felt like I was trespassing. Every kindness I offered felt like an inconvenience. I thought maybe if I stayed useful, they'd let me in. So I folded towels the way Emily liked them, 3 trifold creases and stacked by color. I alphabetized the pantry. I sewed a patch on Jason's blazer sleeve when it tore. I offered to pick up groceries, but Emily replied, "We have it delivered." Ella still smiled at me when we passed in the hallway. She'd mouth hi behind her mother's back. Sometimes she'd sneak drawings under my door, rainbows, stick figures of us holding hands, hearts that said Nana. I kept them all in a box under my bed. One Sunday morning, I came upstairs to make pancakes. I wanted to surprise everyone. I set the table, warmed syrup, and had the bacon sizzling just right. Emily came down, took one look, and said, "Oh, we actually have brunch plans with friends. Sorry." Jason kissed my cheek and mumbled, "Smells great though, Mom," before grabbing his keys. I stood there, spatula in hand, as the eggs deflated in the pan. That afternoon, I packed away the leftovers in Tupperware and labeled them with names. None of the containers were touched. Later that night, Jason came downstairs. He sat on the edge of my bed, the storage room cot with the squeaky springs, and said, "Emily's just adjusting too. She's not used to having anyone else in the house. Give her time, okay?" I smiled, nodded, and said, "Of course." But deep inside, I felt a flicker, tiny but sharp, because it wasn't just Emily. No one had said thank you, not once. It started with the click of a lock. One afternoon, I walked up the stairs with a basket of folded towels, humming an old Simon and Garfunkel tune. I reached for the guest room door, the one Jason had promised was next in line for renovation. But the knob wouldn't turn. I jiggled it gently, still locked. I stood there, towel bundle in hand, and stared at the brass doorknob. A lock, on the guest room. I turned to go, nearly bumping into Emily, who was coming up behind me holding a smoothie in one hand and her phone in the other. "Oh," she said a little too brightly. "Yeah, we had to lock that. Equipment stuff. Jason's setting up a workout area. Didn't he tell you?" He hadn't. I thought that was going to be my room eventually," I said softly. Emily gave a small shrug, like it was out of her hands. "We had to prioritize health. You know how crazy stress has been. I've been having back pain and everything." Then she smiled sweetly. "You understand, right? You always care about family health. I remember Jason saying that." I nodded, but something about the way she used my own kindness, my own values against me made my stomach tighten. Over the next few days, I noticed more things shifting. Men came to the house with toolboxes and large boxes marked Nordic Track and Peloton. I offered coffee, but they were in and out quickly, moving only toward the guest room, the locked room. Once, I caught a glimpse inside through the cracked door. Mirrors on the wall, brand new gym flooring, resistance bands hanging neatly. That night at dinner, Jason looked exhausted. "We just thought it'd be nice for Emily to have a place to decompress. The gym was her idea, helps with anxiety." I didn't ask about my room. I just smiled, passed the salad, and swallowed the ache in my throat. A few days later, I went to the hallway closet for my sewing kit. I found it buried beneath boxes labeled "Donate" and "Seasonal." When I opened it, all my craft supplies were crammed together. Crushed yarn, bent needles, the pincushion my mother gave me nearly torn. My things had been shoved aside. I took the box back downstairs to my storage room and spent the afternoon reorganizing it. At one point, I looked up and realized I hadn't been upstairs in 2 full days. That realization made me pause. Why? Why had I stopped going upstairs? Later that week, Emily had friends over, 3 women from her yoga group, all dressed in matching leggings and sipping sparkling water. I stayed out of sight in the kitchen, scrubbing the sink. But voices travel, especially in open floor plans. "She's still living downstairs?" one woman asked. Emily laughed, quiet but sharp. "Yeah. It's actually convenient, though. She watches the house when we're out, helps with little things. I mean, it's kind of like having a live-in caretaker, without paying for one." They all laughed. One of them said, "Genius." I froze. Not sad, not angry, just frozen. I waited until their voices drifted outside. Then I stood there, sponge in hand, heart thudding slow and steady. The insult wasn't the worst part. It was the tone, the ease, as if my presence had been reduced to a utility, like a dishwasher or a smoke alarm. That night, I lay awake on my narrow cot staring at the unfinished ceiling. A spider moved between 2 beams. I followed it with my eyes, wondering how long it would take before it built something permanent. I hadn't unpacked my winter sweaters. I hadn't hung a single photo on the wall. Why? Because deep down, I hadn't believed this was permanent. But Emily had. And Jason? Jason had disappeared behind silence and obligation. I began to catalog the red flags in my mind. The door lock, the gym equipment, the closet reorganization, the laughing voices. Each one a thread. Alone, they were explainable. Together, they were a pattern. I wasn't family here. I was a convenience. And maybe, just maybe, they were hoping I'd realize it soon enough and leave on my own. My 67th birthday started with butter and flour. I woke up early, earlier than usual, and pulled my hair into a bun like I used to when Harold and I hosted Sunday brunches. The house was still quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator as I mixed the batter, humming an old tune under my breath. Chocolate cake, Jason's favorite. Ella loved to lick the spoon. I saved it for her, just in case she wandered in. I set the table with the nice plates, Emily's white porcelain ones with the silver trim. I even brought out the small candle I'd kept from last year, shaped like the number 67. It had survived in a box labeled Celebrations, the only one I'd opened since moving in. By 10 a.m., the cake had cooled. I frosted it carefully, layering the ganache smooth and even. The table was set, coffee brewed. A plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh-cut strawberries waited near the center. I sat at the edge of the table and waited. Jason's car wasn't in the driveway. Neither was Emily's. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. The house remained still. By 11 a.m., I texted Jason, "Hey, sweetie, just made a birthday brunch. Come down when you're free." No reply. By noon, the eggs had gone cold. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat in silence. I told myself, they probably just forgot. It's Saturday, maybe they're out with the kids. But my birthday? After everything? I opened my laptop. It felt ridiculous checking social media at a moment like this, but I was grasping for something. Any trace that they remembered, that they cared, that I wasn't invisible. And there it was. A story on Emily's Instagram, posted just 20 minutes ago. I tapped the volume icon, music played, some upbeat workout track. The camera panned across the upstairs guest room, now fully converted. Mirrored wall, padded floors, neon lighting that spelled out, "Stronger every day." Emily stood center frame in tight leggings and a sports bra, lifting weights with perfect posture and a beaming smile. The caption read, "Morning grind, mind be dough, body, everything else. See self-care Saturdays, no excuses." I watched it twice, then a third time. And suddenly, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not violently, just a quiet splinter, the kind you don't even feel until you try to breathe. They knew, they had to know, and even if they didn't, what did that say? I turned off the laptop and stared at the cake. The frosting had begun to lose its sheen. The candle leaned slightly, sagging into the soft chocolate. A slice would have tasted perfect with coffee, but I had no appetite. I pushed back my chair and stood slowly. My legs felt unsteady. I moved to the sink and began washing the dishes. One plate, one fork, one mug. My hands trembled slightly as the warm water ran over them, the soap slipping between my fingers. The sponge squeaked against the pan. I didn't notice the tears until one dropped into the soapy water, then another. By the time I finished rinsing, my shoulders were shaking. I clutched the edge of the counter, knuckles white, eyes locked on the faucet as if the force of my stare could hold back whatever was breaking inside me. No one had called. No one had come. No one had remembered. I'd cooked, cleaned, folded, smiled. I'd stayed small, quiet, helpful. I'd asked for nothing, and on the one day a year that was supposed to belong to me, I got silence. And a fitness video. I walked back to my room, my storage room, and sat on the edge of the cot. A chill had settled in the air. I pulled my cardigan tighter, not just for warmth, but to hold something in. My phone buzzed. I reached for it, heart lifting slightly, but it was a spam text offering insurance. I laughed. A sharp, broken laugh that echoed off concrete walls. The cake remained untouched on the table. When I returned later that night, it was covered in plastic wrap. No one had sliced it. No one had asked. I tossed the plate in the trash and went to bed without dinner. That night, I dreamed of my old house, of a kitchen filled with laughter, the smell of cinnamon rolls, Jason's tiny hands tugging on my apron. In the dream, I turned to speak to him, but the room was empty. That night, after the cake had hardened under plastic wrap and the house settled into silence, I pulled the green binder from the bottom of my suitcase. It was old, corners bent, filled with receipts, handwritten notes, bank statements, my quiet archive of every dollar I'd tracked since Harold passed. The binder had always been a comfort. Numbers don't lie. They bring order when emotions unravel. I sat on my cot, turned on the small desk lamp, and flipped to the section labeled Jason House. There it was, in my handwriting, June 12, 2021, $80,000 wire to Jason Mitchell, investment toward family home. 2 years ago, he had called me during a rough patch. Emily had been laid off, the housing market was brutal, and the bank wouldn't approve their full mortgage. Just a bridge loan, Jason had said. We'll pay you back once things stabilize. You'll always have a place with us. I hadn't hesitated. It was money from my retirement fund. Harold and I had saved for decades, clipping coupons and skipping vacations. I transferred the funds that very week, hand-delivered a printed confirmation to Jason, and added it to the binder, just for record-keeping, not distrust. But now, I opened my laptop and searched the county property records. My hands moved slowly, deliberately, as if my body already knew what my heart refused to admit. I entered the address and clicked Search. Owner, Jason Mitchell and Emily Mitchell. No mention of me. No cosign. No shared stake. No acknowledgement. My name wasn't on the deed. I scrolled again. It wasn't a mistake. I closed the laptop. I sat there, frozen. Binder open on my lap. The number 80,000 glowing like a brand against the page. I thought of the past year, the storage room, the gym upstairs, the birthday they forgot. And now, this. No legal tie, no voice, no room. I wasn't family. I was a footnote. I stood up too quickly, the binder tumbling to the floor, papers scattering across the rug. I dropped to my knees, scrambling to collect them, heart pounding. One receipt caught my eye, a credit card charge from a year ago. Jason had bought a flat-screen TV. I remembered. He'd said it was a family splurge. He used my card. I never asked for reimbursement. At the time, it didn't matter, because at the time, I believed I was part of that family. My breaths shortened. A tightness gripped my chest. Not fear, not even sadness. Recognition. The kind that rises like cold water up the spine, inch by inch, until your body goes numb. I wasn't just forgotten. I had been used. Not maliciously, perhaps. Not with a scheme drawn out on a whiteboard, but gradually, systematically. I had become convenient. A live-in helper, a financial backstop, a background fixture. They hadn't intended to build a future with me. They had made room for my money, not for me. I leaned back against the wall and stared at the ceiling, the exposed beams, the cobweb in the corner I hadn't bothered to clean. It hit me. Why Emily kept smiling politely, why Jason always changed the subject when I asked about the upstairs room, why Ella wasn't allowed to visit me anymore. Because my expiration date had always been built in. I thought of confronting them, marching upstairs, binder in hand, demanding answers. But something stopped me. Not fear, but clarity. They wouldn't see it. Not the betrayal, not the pain, because in their minds, they'd done nothing wrong. They'd offered me a roof. I should be grateful. I picked up the binder and gently closed it. Set it back under the cot. I stood in the center of the room, arms folded, and took a long breath. No more excuses. No more trying to earn a place I already paid for. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't toss or turn. I lay in bed, eyes open, planning. I had lived my whole life keeping the peace, holding the family together. But peace without respect isn't peace. And this time, I wasn't going to fade into the background. This time, they'd hear me, whether they wanted to or not. I spent the next morning at the public library tucked into a far corner between rows of dusty biographies and outdated atlases. The computer lab was nearly empty, just me, an older man reading baseball stats, and a teenager playing something loud in his earbuds. I logged in using a guest pass and opened 3 tabs: my bank, the county clerk's office, and an incognito Google search. First stop, the wire transfer. June 12th, 2021, $80,000. From my retirement fund to Jason Mitchell's personal account. I clicked through the transaction history. No repayments, not even a partial deposit. I checked again. Nothing. Not a dime had come back. I scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad, drawing arrows, underlining dates. I remembered Jason telling me, "It'll be a few months, Mom. Once things settle with Emily's job, we'll square up." But that had been 24 months ago, and they'd never brought it up again. Next, I pulled the property records one more time to confirm. Jason Mitchell and Emily Mitchell. Sole owners. No shared ownership. No lien in my name. I had no legal claim to the home I helped buy. Then came the surprise. In the county tax file, there was a section labeled Mortgage Details. I clicked it out of curiosity. Lion holder, Horizon Federal Bank. Loan amount, $420,000. Origination date, August 2022. More than a year after I gave Jason the $80,000, he and Emily had taken out a second mortgage. Why? I searched the bank's name, Horizon Federal, and saw that it specialized in home equity loans for small business expansion. Then I searched Emily Mitchell Plus Business and found her Instagram, Awesome All Fit with Emily M. 12.6K followers. Bio, certified home fitness coach, DM for private sessions, my gym, your results. There were dozens of posts, but the most recent one made my breath catch. A video tour of the upstairs guest room. "Welcome to my private studio," she chirped, phone camera gliding across the padded floor, the neon sign, the row of kettlebells and balance balls. "This space is my dream come true. It took months of planning and investment, but it's finally mine." She smiled into the camera, glowing. In the comments, someone wrote, "Wow, you have a home gym like that? Goals." Emily replied, "Yep, bought this house last year. Best decision we ever made." Bought. We. As if my money had never existed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. They'd used my $80,000 as a down payment, then taken out a second mortgage on top of it to fund a side hustle. Emily got a gym. Jason got peace in the house, and I got 4 cement walls and a lamp that flickered when the microwave ran. I started screenshotting everything. The posts, the property history, the mortgage data. I emailed the files to myself and backed them up to a flash drive I'd brought in my purse. If they were going to pretend I never contributed, I'd make sure someone else saw the truth. Back at the house that afternoon, no one noticed where I'd been. Emily was upstairs, probably mid-lunge or hosting a client. Jason was out. Ella and Tyler were at school. I slipped into the kitchen and opened the drawer where Emily kept the mail. Bank statements, insurance forms, a few catalogs, nothing dramatic. Until I found a receipt with both their names on it. Business liability insurance, home gym studio, Mitchell Fitness LLC. They'd filed a business with an address. This address. I took a picture. That night, I searched the LLC online. It was real, registered 6 months ago under both their names. Monthly liability insurance, $250. Website pending, payment portal coming soon. It all fit. They'd never planned to give me a room upstairs. That space had been claimed the moment my wire transfer landed. I was a placeholder, a bridge fund. The soft voice in Emily's head saying, "You can do this. She'll stay quiet. She always does." I stared at my notes, the yellow pad now a tangled mess of arrows, question marks, and angry underlines. I flipped to a clean page and wrote one sentence at the top. This is not what Harold would have wanted. And I believed it with every fiber in my being. He had built our life on fairness, respect, and hard work. We'd sacrificed vacations so Jason could have braces, taken second jobs to save for college, eaten canned soup during the 2008 crash. Harold had been a man of his word. And now, his wife slept in a storage room, while their son turned a blind eye to betrayal. I looked around the space. Dusty corners, flickering light, the stack of birthday cards I'd written for everyone else but never received back. They may have bought this house, but they didn't own me. Not my silence, not my dignity, not anymore. Days passed after my discoveries, but the weight on my chest only grew heavier. Emily's smiles grew thinner, her polite avoidance became colder. I sensed the walls closing in, not just the physical ones of my storage room, but the invisible ones built around my very presence. One afternoon, Emily approached me cautiously. She held a manila folder, her eyes trying to look kind but guarded. "Margaret," she began softly, "Jason and I think it would be best if you signed some paperwork, just standard stuff, in case of emergencies." I looked at the papers. One was a medical power of attorney, the other a document titled Non-Interference Agreement, related to their property and financial assets. "The medical one is so we can make decisions for you if something happens," Emily explained, "and the other is just to clarify the house and assets so there are no misunderstandings." I smiled gently, keeping my voice steady. "Of course, Emily. I want what's best for all of us." I took the documents, feigning trust. I signed the medical power of attorney first. It felt harmless, even responsible. But the other document made me pause. It was dense with legal jargon, mentioning waiver of property claims and relinquishment of financial interests. A quick glance told me it wasn't something to sign blindly. Later that day, I pulled the folder out from my tote and took pictures of every page with my phone. I knew I needed a second opinion, someone outside this tangled mess. The next morning, I reached out to an old family friend, a lawyer named Susan, who had helped Harold with their wills years ago. Susan wasn't just a lawyer. She was someone who had seen me at my best and worst, a friend who understood family complexities. I sent her the pictures with a short message. "Need advice? Please call when you can." Susan replied quickly, her tone warm but serious. "Margaret will review everything and talk soon. You don't have to sign anything you're unsure about." A few days later, we met in a quiet coffee shop. I slid the folder across the table, watching Susan's eyes scan the papers, her brow furrowed. "These are strong legal documents," she said carefully, "especially the non-interference agreement. If you sign this, you essentially waive any claim to the property or financial interests related to the house." I nodded slowly. "They never put my name on the deed. I discovered the mortgage too." Susan sighed. "This isn't just about where you sleep. It's about control. Emily and Jason want you out of the picture. Legally, financially, emotionally." I swallowed hard. "What are my options?" She leaned in. "You can contest the ownership. There's a paper trail, your loan to Jason. If you can prove it was a loan and not a gift, you have a case. You may even reclaim a stake in the house." "Really?" I whispered, hope flaring. "But it won't be easy," Susan cautioned. "You'll need documentation, bank records, transfer receipts, correspondence, and you'll have to be prepared for family fallout." I thought about the birthdays missed, the locked doors, the whispered conversations. "I'm ready," I said. Susan smiled, warmth in her eyes. "Good. We'll start with gathering everything. I can help draft letters and guide you through the process. But you have to be firm. This is your home." That afternoon, I went home with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I pulled the green binder from under my cot, the one with all the receipts and notes, and began compiling everything for Susan. I printed copies of the mortgage details, Emily's Instagram posts, the LLC registration, and the insurance receipts. Each piece felt like armor in a battle I never wanted to fight, but had no choice but to face. Over the next few weeks, Susan and I worked quietly. She drafted letters to Jason, informing him of my intention to seek legal recognition of my investment. She advised me on how to keep communications civil but firm. I learned the importance of keeping calm, of not letting anger dictate my words. At night, When the house was silent and the flicker from my bedside lamp was the only light, I'd rehearse what I would say when the time came to confront them. I wasn't a visitor anymore. I was a rightful owner, and I was no longer afraid. Susan called one evening just as I was folding laundry in my little corner of the storage room. Her voice was calm but clipped, the way someone speaks when trying to gently deliver bad news. "Margaret," she said, "I've been doing a little background checking, not just legal stuff, but personal context. I had a hunch about Emily, so I asked a colleague of mine who works in elder law. Turns out they know her mother." I sat down slowly on the edge of the cot, a warm towel still in my lap. Susan continued, "About 2 years ago, Emily's mother, Linda, was placed in an assisted living facility. Nothing unusual about that, except she didn't want to go." My pulse quickened. She was living with Emily and Jason for a short while in a similar arrangement. Then, according to some close friends, Emily started making things difficult, set rigid schedules, controlled what Linda could eat when she could use the bathroom upstairs, talked over her in every conversation. "That sounds familiar," I said quietly. Susan exhaled. Eventually, Linda began to feel like she was losing her independence. She complained to friends that she felt like a burden. One day, Emily came home with brochures from a facility, said it would be better for everyone. Within 2 weeks, Linda had moved out. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because every piece of that story matched my life, detail for detail. "She made her own mother feel like excess," I whispered. "She orchestrated the guilt just enough so Linda would volunteer to disappear." Susan's silence was agreement. I hung up and sat still for what felt like hours. The towel on my lap had gone cold. The washing machine had stopped humming, but my mind raced. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This wasn't oversight. This was a strategy, a method. Emily had done it before. First you're helpful, then you're inconvenient, then you're gone. And Jason, he had let it happen once already. Of course he would let it happen again. I stood and began to pace the room, the gym upstairs, the locked doors, the quiet time rules, the business paperwork, the medical proxy, the so-called misunderstanding with the house deed. Every moment of politeness suddenly reframed itself in my mind, not as kindness, but as manipulation wrapped in silk. The image of Emily smiling into her Instagram camera, flashing her perfectly toned arms in that private studio I helped pay for, filled me with a nausea I couldn't shake. And Jason, my boy, had stood by, had handed her the tools. He probably believed he was protecting the peace, but peace without truth is just silence. And silence, I now saw, was what they had wanted from me all along. They didn't need my company. They needed my money. They didn't want my presence. They wanted plausible deniability. If I left, they could say, "She decided it was time." They could frame it as my choice, a graceful exit, a mature decision. But now I saw the blueprint. They hadn't built me a home. They'd built a quiet exit ramp. I pulled out a notebook from the drawer beside my bed and wrote 4 words across the top of a clean page. "I won't vanish quietly." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with a pen in hand, listing every small interaction I'd brushed off, every ignored meal, every subtle eye roll, every time I was talked over or spoken to like a child. They say hindsight is 20/20, but this wasn't hindsight anymore. This was clarity. I was never meant to stay here. I was meant to fade. But I had one advantage Emily hadn't counted on. I wasn't like her mother. I wasn't going to retreat. I was going to reclaim. The next morning, I began with the binder. I pulled it from under my cot with the reverence of someone opening a family Bible. The green cover was frayed at the edges, the spine nearly split from years of use, but every page inside held something real, proof that I wasn't just a guest in this house. I was a contributor, a builder, a believer. I turned to the section labeled House Loan, Jason. There was the printed wire transfer confirmation, $80,000 from my retirement account to Jason's personal savings. Below it, taped carefully, was the handwritten note Jason had given me 2 summers ago. "Thanks for believing in us, Mom. We'll make this house a home for all of us. I promise to repay every cent. Love, Jason." No legal language, no signature from a notary. But it was in his handwriting, and it was something. I took photos of each document with my phone, making sure the timestamps were visible. Then I scanned them at the library, backing everything up to both email and a thumb drive. I labeled the folder on my desktop. Proof. I started cataloging everything. Screenshots of Emily's Instagram posts promoting her gym, the business registration for Mitchell Fitness LLC, mortgage documents listing the second loan, a copy of the medical proxy and the non-interference agreement Emily had asked me to sign, emails confirming no repayment plan was ever followed through. Then came the messages, Jason's texts over the last 2 years, always filled with, "We'll talk soon," and "just until things settle." I highlighted every vague promise, every soft deflection. Next, I called Susan. "I'm ready," I said simply. We met at her office, where she had already drafted a letter of legal intent. It was formal, concise, and powerful. It didn't accuse. It stated facts. I had contributed $80,000 toward the down payment of the home. I was not listed as a co-owner. I had not been repaid. I had documented proof of intention for repayment and ongoing financial involvement. I would be seeking restitution, either partial ownership or reimbursement. Susan looked me in the eye. "This letter won't be a surprise to Emily. She'll see it coming. But Jason, it may be the first time he truly sees what's happened." "I hope so," I said. But I wasn't going to rely on hope. I wanted witnesses. So I planned a dinner. I told Jason and Emily I wanted to host a small family gathering on Sunday evening. I framed it as a thank you dinner for everything they've done. I even asked if I could cook in the kitchen upstairs, just this once. Emily blinked but smiled. "Of course, Margaret, that's thoughtful." She didn't ask questions. I made the guest list short. Jason, Emily, Ella, Tyler, and 2 of my oldest friends, Susan, of course, and Diane, a neighbor from my old block who had known Jason since he was in diapers. I invited them under the pretense of catching up. What I didn't tell Jason or Emily was that Susan would be bringing a printed copy of the legal letter, or that Diane would serve as a neutral witness. The week leading up to the dinner, I moved carefully. I cleaned the storage room, not because it needed it, but because I needed to feel grounded. I cooked in small batches, testing recipes I hadn't made in years. My hands remembered every motion, every measurement: garlic herb chicken, roasted rosemary potatoes, lemon pound cake, comfort food with purpose. I ironed a blouse Harold once complimented, set aside a pair of earrings I hadn't worn in years. I practiced what I'd say, not dramatic, not angry, just clear. On Saturday night, I printed everything. Every screenshot, every bank receipt, every handwritten note. I placed them into a manila folder, labeled it "For Jason," and slid it into my purse. Then I wrote a short letter, just 3 paragraphs. It wasn't legal. It wasn't dramatic. It was just the truth. A truth I wanted Jason to hear from me directly, about what he had forgotten, about what I had remembered. When I finished, I placed it on top of the documents in the folder. The next evening, I'd set the table, and the truth, served warm, without venom, would finally be the main course. The dining table hadn't looked that beautiful in months. The white linen tablecloth was freshly pressed, corners weighted with silver napkin rings that Emily usually saved for holidays. I arranged the plates myself, 1 at each setting, a sprig of rosemary tied with twine atop each napkin. Candles flickered gently in the center, casting a golden glow over the meal I'd spent all day preparing. Herb-crusted chicken, roasted vegetables, warm bread, and lemon pound cake with sugared blueberries. Jason arrived first, carrying a bottle of red wine. "Hey, this looks amazing," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "It's just dinner," I replied with a smile, taking the bottle from him. "But thank you." Emily followed, dressed in her usual understated way. Athleisure with a cashmere cardigan. She gave the spread a cursory nod. "Very nice, Margaret," she said, glancing around the table. "What's the occasion again?" "No occasion," I said. "Just felt like cooking for everyone." Ella and Tyler took their seats at the kids' end, already reaching for bread. Diane arrived shortly after, wrapping me in a warm hug before settling in across from Jason. And then came Susan, with her leather briefcase tucked discreetly under her chair. I poured wine, water for the kids, and took my seat at the head of the table. I hadn't sat there since moving in. Emily usually claimed it, but tonight no one objected. We began eating, the room filled with the soft clink of forks and quiet compliments. Jason asked Ella about school. Emily scrolled her phone between bites. Tyler dropped a pea, and I leaned down to pick it up with a smile. Then, halfway through the meal, I set down my fork. I lifted my glass. "Before dessert," I began, "I'd like to say something." Jason looked up. "Sure, Mom." Emily blinked, still chewing. I stood slowly, smoothing my blouse with both hands. "First, I want to thank you for letting me stay here, truly. I know it hasn't been easy having another adult in the house. I've tried to stay out of the way, help where I can. I know I'm not always convenient." Jason opened his mouth, but I held up a hand gently. "I also want to thank you," I continued, "for giving me the time and space to reflect. These past months, especially my birthday, gave me clarity." Emily shifted in her seat. "Margaret, if this is about your birthday, I raised my voice just a hair. "It's not about the birthday, Emily. It's about everything." I reached into my purse, pulled out the manila folder, and laid it carefully on the table in front of Jason. "Inside, you'll find documentation," I said calmly. "Proof of the $80,000 I transferred to you for the purchase of this house. A copy of your handwritten note promising to repay it. Records of your second mortgage, which funded Emily's business. And legal documents stating my intention to reclaim what is rightfully mine." Jason paled. Emily froze, her fork suspended mid-air. I didn't flinch. "I'm not doing this to embarrass you," I added, voice even. "I'm doing it because I spent 2 years living beneath this roof, believing I was part of something. And I've come to understand that belief wasn't shared." Diane reached for her glass, watching silently. Susan remained still, her expression unreadable. Emily finally found her voice. "You're turning dinner into a deposition?" "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "I'm turning silence into truth." Jason opened the folder, fingers trembling as he flipped through the pages. I watched his eyes scan the numbers, the note, the screenshots. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. I turned to Susan. "Would you mind passing him the letter?" She handed it over wordlessly. Jason read it, his shoulders sagging with each line. Ella looked between us, confused. "Daddy? What's going on?" He didn't answer. I reached for the wine, took a slow sip, and set it down again. Then I smiled, calm, resolute. "The cake is in the kitchen," I said. "We can serve it now or we can wait. Up to you." No one moved, and for the first time in this house, silence didn't feel like dismissal. It felt like power. Jason stared at the letter as if it might rewrite itself if he looked long enough. His lips moved slightly, mouthing words he couldn't say out loud. Emily, on the other hand, was already bristling. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, pushing her chair back a few inches. "You're making a scene, Margaret. At a family dinner, in front of the kids." "It's not a scene," I replied, my voice even. "It's an accounting." Jason looked up, swallowing hard. "Mom, why didn't you just talk to me first? We could have figured something out." "I tried," I said, "for 2 years, quietly, politely. I cooked, I cleaned, I stayed out of the way. I reminded you of that upstairs room. I let Emily lock the door and call it self-care. I sat in silence while you forgot my birthday. This," I tapped the folder. Is me finally speaking in a language you both understand? Emily scoffed. A legal threat? Over a loan we never even asked for? Susan shifted in her seat but stayed quiet. Jason rubbed his temples. Emily, she did give us the money. You know she did. Emily snapped her head toward him. We didn't ask for it, Jason. Your mom offered. That makes it a gift. No, I said firmly. A gift doesn't come with a handwritten note promising to repay every cent. I reached into the folder and pulled out the slip of paper. Jason's scrawled handwriting, dated with the words, "We'll make this house a home for all of us." I held it out. Your words, Jason. His face turned red. He looked from the note to his wife, then to me, then down again. I remember writing it. I just didn't think that I'd keep it, I offered. No, he whispered, that it would come to this. Across the table, Diane exhaled slowly, her gaze fixed on Emily. I remember when Margaret told me about the loan. You were behind on everything. Car, mortgage, credit cards. She saved your neck. Emily stood up abruptly, her chair screeching back. You know what? I don't need to sit here and be ambushed by your little support group. No one's ambushing you, I said calmly. But if you feel cornered, maybe ask yourself why. Emily's eyes blazed. I let you into my home. No, I said. You let me into a storage room. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Her jaw clenched. Her nostrils flared, and without another word she turned and stormed out of the dining room, her footsteps sharp against the hardwood floor. The silence that followed was thick. Jason finally broke it. She just doesn't like being surprised. She doesn't like being confronted with the truth, Susan said, her tone clipped but calm. And to be fair, this has been building for a long time. Ella looked up from her untouched plate. Daddy, is Grandma in trouble? Jason shook his head slowly. No, baby. Grandma's not in trouble. I leaned across the table, smiling gently at her. I'm just making sure everyone remembers how things began and how they'll move forward. Jason sat back in his chair, staring down at the papers. What happens now? I folded my hands neatly in my lap. That depends on you. I'm not demanding anything, yet. But I want a formal agreement. I want recognition of the money I contributed, and I want it in writing. And if we refuse, Jason asked softly, Susan answered for me, then we proceed with litigation, quietly, but completely. He nodded, rubbing his jaw. I'll need time. You've had 2 years, I said. Now I need action. He didn't argue. Dinner ended without dessert. The lemon pound cake sat untouched on the sideboard, its sugary glaze glinting under the chandelier. No one had room for sweetness. I cleared the table myself, the clink of dishes echoing through the stillness. Diane helped dry. Susan packed her briefcase, but not before placing a copy of the letter beside Jason's plate. Ella hugged me goodnight. Tyler waved from the stairs. Jason lingered by the door, folder in hand, eyes heavy. He looked like a man who had just realized the cost of forgetting who helped him build his life. The next morning, I found Jason sitting on the back porch, shoulders hunched, coffee in hand. His eyes were red, the kind of red that came from a sleepless night filled with regret. The folder I'd given him lay open on the patio table, the edges slightly curled from being handled over and over. He didn't hear me at first. Only when I stepped onto the wooden planks did he glance up. I read everything, he said quietly. I nodded. I figured you would. He looked down at the mug. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I never meant for any of this to happen. I got stuck. Between you and Emily. I tried to keep the peace, but I ended up betraying both of you. I sat beside him, the early morning sun casting long shadows over the grass. You didn't betray both of us, I said softly. You betrayed yourself. He wiped at his eyes. I thought if I just stayed quiet, things would fix themselves. I didn't want to choose sides. "That's the thing, Jason," I said. "You did choose. You just didn't say it out loud." He winced, staring into the distance. "She says she's leaving. Emily. She packed a bag this morning." I raised an eyebrow. "Where's she going?" "Her sister's place, maybe. She said she can't stay in a house where she's not respected." I let out a short breath. "Interesting. I suppose that makes two of us." He didn't laugh. "Do you want her to go?" I asked. Jason didn't answer right away. Finally, he shrugged. "I don't know. I love her. But seeing what she did to you, it's like I finally woke up, and now I can't unsee it." We sat in silence for a while, the wind rustling through the trees. Then I said what I'd rehearsed the night before. "You don't need to worry about me staying, Jason. I've already found another place, a small apartment across town near the senior center. It's quiet, has a garden out back. Nothing fancy, but it's mine." He turned sharply. "Wait, what?" "I'm leaving," I said. "Next week. The lease starts Monday." His mouth opened, then closed. "But you just fought to stay." "No," I said. "I fought to be acknowledged, to make sure I wasn't erased. I don't need this house, but I do need my dignity and my money." Jason stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "I'll sign whatever agreement Susan drafts," he said. "We'll make it official. You'll get back the money, with interest if you want." "I don't want interest," I replied. "I want closure." Just then, Emily appeared in the doorway, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Her face was tight, makeup perfect, every detail in place except her eyes, which were colder than I'd ever seen them. "I'm heading out," she announced. Jason stood but didn't move toward her. She looked at me. "Congratulations, Margaret, you win." I gave her a small smile. "It was never a competition, Emily, just a reckoning." She scoffed, adjusting her grip on the bag. "Well, enjoy your little moral victory. I'll be fine. I've got my business, my clients, my life." "I'm sure you do," I said. "Just remember whose money built that life." She turned without another word and walked toward her car. Jason and I watched her drive off. After a long pause, he spoke again. "I'm going to fix this. I promise." I patted his hand. "Then start by fixing yourself. You're still a good man, Jason. You just forgot who made you that way." I left him there with his coffee and his guilt and walked back into the house. Not as a victim, not as a mother desperate to be wanted, but as a woman who had reclaimed what was hers. The apartment was small, but the sunlight poured through the windows like it had been waiting just for me. I moved in on a Tuesday morning, a week after the dinner that unraveled everything. The building was part of a quiet senior living complex, independent units with shared gardens and a community hall, where residents hosted everything from potlucks to movie nights. My new place had one bedroom, a kitchenette, and a little balcony that overlooked a flower bed maintained by a woman named Ruth, who was 82 and swore by morning Tai Chi. Unpacking didn't take long. I had left most of my things in storage, but brought what mattered. The photo of Harold from our trip to Lake George, the green binder, now carefully filed away, and a tin of my mother's old cookie cutters. My first night there, I slept with the window cracked open and no sound but the wind and the occasional cricket. It was the best sleep I'd had in 2 years. The days began to settle into a rhythm. I joined a yoga class twice a week, gentle stretching and a lot of laughter, led by a retired nurse named Gloria, who believed every ache could be cured with mint tea and a smile. On Thursdays, I volunteered in the shared kitchen, teaching a baking class to a group of neighborhood kids who came by after school. We made everything from peanut butter cookies to apple turnovers, and I found that flour-covered fingers and giggles were a balm for the soul. I wasn't lonely, not anymore. People here asked questions because they cared, not because they were checking a box. When Ruth invited me to join her for tea, it wasn't out of politeness. It was because she genuinely wanted company. There were no locked doors, no whispered conversations behind my back, no lists taped to the fridge. I was Margaret again. Not the woman in the storage room, not a burden, not an invisible presence floating through someone else's life. Just me. Jason came by 2 weeks after I moved in. He brought a plant, succulent, low maintenance, and a bottle of my favorite lavender dish soap. I opened the door to find him standing there, unsure, holding the bag like a child about to apologize for breaking a lamp. "This okay?" he asked. I smiled. "It's perfect. Come in." No, he sat on the couch, took in the space, and said, "It feels like you." "I think so too," I said, pouring him a cup of chamomile. We didn't talk about Emily, not that day, but he asked about my baking class. He told me Ella had started writing about her Nana in school essays, and before he left, he hugged me longer than he had in years. He came again the next weekend, and the one after that. We talked more each time. He was quieter now, softer around the edges, less distracted, less defended. He helped me set up a bird feeder on the balcony, brought over a folding chair so he could sit out there with me. "Feels peaceful here," he said once. "It is," I replied. "It's honest." As for Emily, she was gone. Jason said she had moved out for good. The business continued, but without the gym in the house. She rented a studio elsewhere. They didn't divorce, not yet, but he admitted they were taking space. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. She had exited my life as quietly as she had entered, just a presence that once filled a room with tension and now was simply absent. And I didn't miss her. Not the way you miss people who see you, who value you. I spent my mornings in the garden with Ruth, my afternoons teaching children how to knead dough, and my evenings watching the sky turn pink over the flower beds. Occasionally, I'd get a text from Jason, a photo of Ella with flour on her nose, a video of Tyler's soccer game. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was the one I had earned. A life with no obligation to be small, a space where I didn't have to wait to be invited, where I didn't have to prove my worth in silence, where I could simply be seen, heard, and whole. If you're reading this or hearing it in some corner of your own quiet space, I want to tell you something as plainly as I can. You're not alone. You're not wrong for wanting to feel needed, and you're certainly not selfish for needing respect in return. I spent a long time believing that if I gave enough time, money, silence, space, I'd earn love in return. I thought sacrifice was the proof of devotion, and endurance was a kind of virtue. That being invisible meant being noble. But here's what I've learned, now that I've stepped out of the shadows. Silence is not peace, and shrinking yourself for others doesn't make you lovable. It just makes you small. I'm telling this story not to shame anyone, not even Emily, but to illuminate something that so many mothers, especially older ones, carry like a hidden scar. This unspoken fear that we become burdens once we're no longer needed for carpool or casseroles. That fear keeps us quiet. It keeps us in storage rooms. It makes us say, "It's okay," when it isn't. But it's not our silence that preserves the family. It's our truth. It's our presence. It's our refusal to disappear. When I look back on everything, the forgotten birthday, the legal manipulation, the nights I stared at cement walls, I realize I wasn't angry as much as I was heartbroken. Not because they hurt me, but because I let it go on for so long, thinking that was what love required. It doesn't. Love does not require your erasure. Respect doesn't grow from guilt or obligation. It comes from clarity, boundaries, and the quiet strength of a woman who finally says, "No more." Since I moved into this apartment, I've met women with stories like mine, stories that start with sacrifice and end with silence. We sit around tables covered in cookie crumbs and talk about the things we never said to our kids, the dreams we thought we outgrew, and the lives we're reclaiming. We're not done yet. We're not past our prime. We're just getting started. If you're someone's daughter reading this, call your mother. Not because you're supposed to, but because you want to know who she is now. Ask her what she's reading, what she's dreaming about, what makes her laugh when no one's watching. See her. And if you're a mother, especially one who's been feeling like a guest in your own family, then this is for you. Don't wait until someone builds a gym above your head to realize you deserve more. You deserve to be heard before you're gone. You deserve a room with windows, a seat at the table, a name on the deed. And if no one gives you those things, it's okay to take a step back and build something of your own, even if it's small, even if it's just a one-bedroom apartment with good light and a garden tended by a woman who swears by mint tea. Freedom doesn't always look like fireworks and fresh starts. Sometimes it looks like lavender dish soap, Thursday baking classes, and waking up without dread. Sometimes it looks like being alone and feeling full. Jason comes by now and then. We talk, we laugh, we sit quietly sometimes, and that's enough. He's learning. He's growing. He's trying. Emily is gone and I don't miss her. Not out of spite, but because I finally understand that not everyone who enters your life deserves to stay. Some people teach you boundaries by crossing them. Some people teach you your worth by refusing to see it until you show them what it looks like in writing with witnesses. So no, I'm not bitter. I'm free. I tell this story because I want you to know that freedom isn't loud. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And when it does, I hope you listen. Because when I finally did, I found myself again. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's burden, but as someone.